Hey everybody, as you can see we're in, well, the usual spot at this point, but I am setting up a new recording spot for my main channel videos. It's just not ready yet, so we'll be here for a little bit longer. With that said, we're going to get right into it with the first video in the new year. This is the first video that's been requested. There are going to be several request months throughout the year. It's the one, the only, the original Legend of Zelda for the NES. This game was requested by Orcat, so you can all thank her. You'll thank her, and you'll threaten to kill me because, frankly, this game's not very good. Doesn't hold up, never did hold up, and everyone who says it does is just wide-eyed, nostalgic innocents who can't see it for what it is. Why? Let's get into my gameplay experience. So I started my adventure, popped it into my Retron, and spent an hour getting my stream set up, and finally began. I'd been warned that I should make a map as I went, but I never made a map for anything else in my life, and this couldn't be that hard. I played through newer Zelda games and remembered dungeon layouts just fine. How could a straightforward, grid-based map be any worse? So I grabbed a useless piece of wood from an old man, don't read too far into that, and set forth into the woods, and instantly died. And then I died again. And again. And it wasn't my fault, and it wasn't the game. Random PSA time! Do you own a Retron? Well then get the original controller that came with the system. Because this little piece of crap, holy mila! I thought I'd seen useless. I thought I'd seen pathetic.
You looked in a mirror again?
But I had not seen anything until I held this controller in my hands and attempted to play a game with it. It simply does not work. Link would refuse to move any given direction, and whether the button would swing your sword or simply be ignored was in the hands of the angels, and I'd apparently been particularly naughty that day. This flimsy little plastic piece of crap is the most depressing, worthless thing I've ever beheld, and yes, Smith, that includes looking in mirrors.
Look in a mirror while holding it then.
Alright, now you listen here. So in conclusion, shame on you, Retron, for even thinking to release this piece of crap. Everyone in your testing department should be taken out back and shot. Everyone in your release department should all commit seppuku in shame. And if it seems like I'm being a little bit too violent about this, you try and play with this piece of crap! Back to the game. Having acquired a controller from the retro game shop in my area, I proceeded with my adventure. After becoming the third most lost I've ever been in a video game, for anyone wondering, both the first and second times were in MMOs, I finally gave up and died. Before long, I had traveled in new directions and found the first dungeon. Quick, easy dungeon, nothing outside the usual for a Zelda game, and then it's back to exploring the map. I found the 8th dungeon. I got my own sword shoved so far up my butt by Dungeon 8 that I was coughing up splinters. I moved on. After a while, I found Dungeon 3 and met my new mortal enemy, Dark Nuts. Their movements are so random and they can't be hit from the front and they take off huge amounts of your health. I kept trying to go at it, but first of the inanely frustrating factors about this game was kicking in. No, not being lost. That was completely my fault.
Who needs a map?
I did. Badly. What was obnoxious is the hearts in this game. No matter what, when you die, you start back at 3 hearts. So if you have 3 max hearts, you're at full health. If you're at 8 max hearts, man, it must suck to be you. Everything will keep on hitting you for full hearts worth of damage, and you only get those 3. Unlike later games in the series, hearts will rarely drop from enemies. This complication is doubled since inside a dungeon, such as Dungeon 3 in particular, Dark Nuts do too much damage and take too long to kill to be able to farm hearts off of them. But the only other things in the cave are bats and slimes, neither of which drop hearts, or anything else for that matter. This is a running theme through every dungeon. You need to leave the dungeon after every attempt to grind up hearts until you can go back in. Or you memorize the location of the secret fairy fountain and run back and forth after every attempt. This isn't interesting, it isn't design, it isn't fun, and it isn't exploration. This is stalling, deliberately elongating a game for no other reason than to elongate it. This game is full of this tactic. Money is a slow and laborious crawl to build up until you can buy any of the incredibly expensive items. It's again a waste of time just grinding over and over and over. This whole game was literally designed to drag out its own playtime inexorably. so I gave up for the day. I wasn't interested in grinding forever pointlessly, so I set the game aside. When I came back to it the next session, I had a plan. I brought graph paper and I was starting a map. Several hours and a map drawn later, and I had found Dungeon 2. I will mention now that I actually had more fun drawing my map than I did playing the game. Unfortunately, said map was thrown out in a fiery purge of all of my old school papers from that semester. A moment of silence for all that hard work on the map. I entered into Dungeon 2 confident that I would finally overcome the game. I discovered that snakes would drop even more money than any other enemy, and that I was finally able to overcome my limitations. I then overcame Dungeon 3 and spent several more hours wandering the map trying to find anything else I could do. I died many more times, found a few heart pieces, I ranted about the 3-heart revival and running to and from fairy fountains, I ranted about the 1-use candle. I literally cried because a like ate my shield that I just finally bought, and then I gave up. I'm not really sure what broke me, but I was done. I wasn't having any ounce of fun anymore. My map had gotten screwed up somewhere in the top right third, and frankly, I was just sick of life. So I looked up the map. I immediately got even angrier because of how things were hidden. This game crossed from secrets to deliberately obscure and redundant, and if you've seen my Braid review, you know how I feel about such design. The original Legend of Zelda wasn't designed to be fun or interesting. It was designed to force you to keep playing for longer and longer. Hiding things in the most random, obscure spots was part of that. Before you all start enemy, yeah, I've heard the arguments. You all figured it out when you were kids. It's not that hard. It was fun and it's still fun to this day. You don't need the map. It all makes sense. Really? You figured it out without maps and walkthroughs from the internet too. So I'm just an entitled child. I've heard them all and you're wrong on every point. First, let's tackle it makes sense. Yes, it does make sense to you. You know what makes sense to me? The very first book I ever wrote. There's almost 100 characters, several die but continue participating in the story because I'm not sure God understands why, but it makes sense to me when I try to read it, because I remember, if only vaguely, where I was going with everything. The Legend of Zelda hasn't changed since you were 7, and it's not going to. Even with the randomizer, all of the secrets are still in the same place, and there's still the same number of everything somewhere on the map. I recently watched Pro Jared go through the new fan build of a Zelda game. Everything was obscured, poorly designed, and seemed intent on keeping answers away from the player and making them grind eternally. He hated it. He hated it for exactly the same reasons that I am citing in the original game right now. The only difference was that he had never played this game before. No one really had, so he had to suffer through not knowing. If you watched him play the randomizer of this game, it was full of, I remember there's something being here. And when he ran out of things he remembered, you could see him get upset and frustrated. So it's not well designed. It's simply old, so we all can remember where things are, even if we don't realize we remember. Next argument. You figured it out as kids, so it isn't that hard, and you didn't have the internet to tell you everything. You know what? You're right. You didn't have the internet. You paid for the information instead. Get the power, Nintendo power, because it'll have a map of the world, because it'll tell you where the secrets are. So you're absolutely right, you couldn't just look it up like I did. You had to pay for the magazine that blatantly told you exactly what I looked up for free. And you didn't find these secrets on your own, even if you didn't have the power. You heard from the kids at school, there was something here, there was something there. Guess who had the power? And yes, there were some discoveries that would be made without being blatantly told. Those discoveries would be made by hunting every screen, one piece at a time, until you were sure there was nothing there. That is boring and literally the opposite of fun. Would you play a video game if I handed you a box of 400 video games, and if you found the one and only box that contained the right and working disc, you're allowed to play it? Of course you wouldn't. Unless you're a kid and have literally nothing better to do with your afternoon except go outside. So you deal with it, because it's a video game. What else are you gonna do? Finally pick up your room? These things don't make you a genius or the game good. It's just the reality of games in that day. Back to the adventure. I made it all the way up to Dungeon 7. The dungeon layouts weren't designed so much as they were just long and tedious again, designed to make the game as long as possible. I kept needing to grind for more bombs and more money, which necessitated going back into the second dungeon and just going through that dungeon, clearing out all the snakes, then going out and going back in over and over. I was sick of playing, but was determined to see the game to the end. I stopped for the day, but I was going to return, to say that I had seen Ganon fall. 2 days later, I returned back to my Retron, prepared to stab Ganon repeatedly. And something went wrong. I don't know if the internal battery somehow shorted, or if my Retron had done something wrong, but everything was gone. The file that had been on the game when I bought it was erased. My own file was still present, but had been reset to the start of the game when I'd only had 3 hearts. I looked back at the hours and hours that I'd played to even get close to Ganon, and I could feel my single, all-too-human heart sink at the prospect. I then glanced at what game was requested for next week. I got up, shut off my Retron, and bid the land of Hyrule farewell for now. The Legend of Zelda is a classic. It's thanks to games like it and Super Mario Bros. That video gaming became what it is today. Because of that, I still think anyone who cares about the history of gaming should try to play it, and I'm glad that Orcat requested that I do so. However, when anyone goes to play it, I think they also need to keep in mind how much games have advanced past these kinds of obnoxious tactics. It's definitely not a game that really holds up anymore, and I wouldn't dare to even call it good. Is it okay, and does it have some moments? Yes. Enough to make it worth spending the money for this physical copy that I have? I mean, it is a gorgeous copy. But still no. Just emulate it. Give it a try until you're sick of it, and then get on with your life. Just remember to draw a map. Tell me you got that.
I'm drinking on the job.
What's in it?
Soko and lime.
Okay, that's good. Oh, Jesus wept! Get away from me!
I lost my bra running forwards.
What?
I lost my bra running forwards, and I've got 4 boobs because I'm wearing.
Okay, that's it. Okay, that's enough of that.